When Donald Trump became president in January, one of his first acts was to halt the programme that allowed refugees to come to the US. Overnight, foreigners fleeing war and persecution in their home countries found that they were no longer welcome in America. But there is one group of people who President Trump decided to make an exception for, raising considerable eyebrows: white South Africans. On the 12th of May, 59 Afrikaners arrived in Washington to receive refugee status. At a press conference, President Trump said that he had acted because Afrikaners, the white community that largely ruled South Africa during apartheid, face an existential threat.
They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me.
And a couple of weeks later, while hosting the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, during a live news conference, Trump repeated widely discredited claims of a white genocide taking place in South Africa.
They're being executed, and they happen to be white, and most of them happen to be farmers.
His words echoed the views of his South African-born former advisor, Elon Musk, who's repeatedly used his X platform to amplify claims of a white genocide. But many South Africans dismiss this image of their country as wild misinformation.
I'm a white Afrikaans-speaking farmer. My family are white-speaking Afrikaans farmers. I've never witnessed a genocide.
South Africa does have one of the highest murder rates in the world, affecting citizens of all backgrounds. So where does this idea that white South Africans are being uniquely targeted come from? Welcome to BBC Trending. With me, Jonathan Griffin, and from Johannesburg, I'm joined by South African journalist Mpho Lakanje.
Together, we're going to look at why the Trump presidency has been so interested in South Africa by laying out some of the key issues that he and his recent senior advisor, Elon Musk, have posted about.
It's clear Trump has a particular interest in the fate of Afrikaners in South Africa. Afrikaners are mainly white people of Dutch descent who have lived in South Africa since the 1650s.
Historically, Afrikaners were downtrodden by the British in the Boer Wars. But after that, they came to seize the reins of power politically and agriculturally at a time when the black population was stripped of their rights to own land. The consequences are still being felt to this day. A 2017 government land audit revealed white people, who today make up about 7% of the population, own 72% of total farmland held by individuals.
So where did President Trump get the idea that Afrikaners are a disadvantaged group? One explanation could be the Trump team's contact with an Afrikaner pressure group called AfriForum. AfriForum have been lobbying those in Trump's inner circle for years. In February, a few weeks after the publication of that presidential action, a post on AfriForum's X account showed a delegation from their team suited and smiling with the pointed top of the Washington Monument poking above their heads. Accompanying text claimed they met with the Trump administration, requesting intensified pressure on ANC leaders in the interests of Afrikaners and South Africa.
South African President and African National Congress leader Cyril Ramaphosa subsequently accused AfriForum of spreading misinformation about their own country and being unpatriotic. He also suggested law enforcement could look at whether the group's actions were treasonous.
Private property rights under threat in South Africa.
1 month after their trip, AfriForum posted a 47-minute-long YouTube video entitled "Is Trump Right About South Africa?" In it, the group lists grievances on issues from land expropriation to farmer tax. Let's talk about farmer tax first.
I asked Kali Kriel, the CEO of AfriForum, for his take. Let's now talk about security. As a white man who lives in South Africa, Kali, do you feel targeted?
Well, if somebody sings, kill the Boer, kill the farmer.
Let's talk about security.
No, well, I think everybody feels targeted because the police aren't able to successfully fight the scourge of crime. It's too big.
What's interesting to me, Mpho, is that in both the interview and the online video, AfriForum talk a lot about violence, But much of the chat keeps coming back to a song, Kill the Boer.
Kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor.
Yes, it's a specific anti-apartheid multilingual song. Boer is the Afrikaans word for farmer. But since the 19th century, it has also meant Afrikaans person. In my conversations with Kali, the song came up a lot. And in May, when Trump ambushed President Ramaphosa in the Oval Office in front of the world's media with the unexpected screening of a video, that video itself contained instances of Kill the Boer being chanted by a couple of notable South African politicians. AfriForum say that song is hate speech, but supporters of the song say it is a celebration of the fight against white minority rule and not meant to be taken literally. In 2024, AfriForum lost a high-profile court case over the song, with the Supreme Court of Appeals adding the defendant was not actually calling for farmers or white South Africans of Afrikaans descent to be shot. The Constitutional Court say the matter is closed.
What about actual farm attacks, though? Well, at this point, it's worth noting that farm attacks are rarely the racist hate crimes they're often depicted to be. The vast majority of cases feature some degree of robbery, and black people are often victims too. AfriForum say the frequency of farm murders is very high compared to murders in the rest of the country, whereas analysts we've spoken to say that farm attacks are just one crime in a relatively violent society. In February, a Facebook user in Belgium claimed, "There is a genocide in South Africa. 60 white farmers are killed every day by black South Africans." But those numbers are way off. My colleague Peter Mwai has been looking at the stats from the South African Police Service and found that there were 44 farm murders of all racial groups in 2024, in a country that recorded 26,232 murders between January and December. Usually the police don't release data about the race of those killed in farm attacks, but we do have data for between January and March 2025. 5 of the 6 people killed on farms were black, and 1 was white.
While the majority of farms are owned by white people, townships have majority black populations and are some of the most dangerous places in South Africa. About 50% of all murders take place in about 12% of South African Police Service precincts. These are areas that are primarily townships or poor areas in metropolitan cities, mostly populated by black African people. The country's crime statistics show murder victims are overwhelmingly young black men.
There's no genocide in South Africa towards farmers. And I think we emphasize that.
That's Johan Kutsie, CEO of Agri SA, one of the biggest agricultural organizations in South Africa. Johan says he recently met with White House representatives and emphasized that murders on farms must be placed in a wider context of murders in South African society.
Do we have farm murders? Yes, we do. But so we also have other murders. Focus on the criminality in South Africa.
Let's get stuck into another one of the hot-button topics about South Africa, land expropriation. In January, the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, signed into law a bill allowing land seizures by the state without compensation, provided that it's in the public interest to do so.
So, examples of this include if the property is not being used and there's no intention to develop or make money from it, or when it poses a risk to people. The majority of South Africa's farmland is currently owned by the white minority. The 2017 land audit says black people, who make up over 80% of the population, only own 4% of farmland held by individuals, more than 30 years after the end of apartheid. So the ANC's idea with this bill is to help rebalance who owns South Africa's land. Concerns about how the law could be used feature prominently in AfriForum's YouTube video. So I asked Kali about land expropriation.
Remember, this Expropriation Act was only published on the 24th of January. So it's a very short time. What we have seen is land grabs.
By the state.
Through the lack of action by the state.
Was it by the state?
No. We've never said it was by the state. But what we've said, There are acts by the state that makes it hard for people. If people come on your land and they've built something there, you cannot, without going to court, do that.
To be clear, what Callie's talking about here is poor people building shacks on farmers' land as a means of housing. This is something that happens in South African society, often angering farmers who own the land. However, it's not the same as land seizures by the state without compensation.
We also asked Friendlin, a farmer in Mpumalanga province, about the expropriation bill.
In my gut, I just don't have a happy feeling about this. So what's going to happen if farmers are worried about and just sell and go?
While the ink has barely dried on the new expropriation law, experts say that it isn't drastically radical. It mainly clarifies existing powers. The President of South Africa has tried to calm fears, posting on X, the law is not a confiscation instrument.
Let's look at Trump's actions and words towards South Africa then. In February, he signed an order to cut assistance to South Africa, which was worth $440 million in 2023. There are also fears that the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which has created hundreds of thousands of jobs by providing tariff-free access to America for South African wine, citrus, soybeans, sugarcane and beef, could be scrapped and replaced with a 30% trade tariff. Trump has also threatened to boycott the G20 summit of world leaders in Johannesburg. Plus, of course, there is that White House offer of resettlement to Afrikaners.
Given that AfriForum's argument is that they are unsafe in their own country, both from land confiscation and farm matters, I wondered if Kali intends on taking up President Trump's asylum offer.
No, and there's a definite reason for that. But we would rather see a solution here in South Africa. We can only, as a cultural community, survive in Africa.
None of the farmers that we've spoken to in the making of this programme say they'll take up the offer to go to the United States. In March, the South African Chamber of Commerce in the USA said its website received nearly 70,000 registrations from South Africans seeking more information about moving. In May, the first group of 59 white South Africans arrived to settle in the US.
President Trump's inner circle contains several white people born or raised in South Africa, including, until recently, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. Musk, who has lived in the US for over 30 years, has peppered his X account since January with false claims about South Africa, including that there is a white genocide taking place here. To understand why, I spoke to his dad, Errol. Some people are saying Elon and President Donald Trump are using X to spread disinformation about South Africa.
No, you can't spread disinformation on X because it is too policed. It has AI grok policing.
Of course, as regular listeners to Trending will know, it is possible for misinformation to spread on X. The platform is policed in a loose way, and while misinformation tends to receive a community note, Musk's white genocide claim did not.
I'm trying to understand what's his interest to the issues that are happening here in South Africa.
You know, he heads big companies. One of the biggest is Starlink. And so his interest in South Africa came about recently, largely because of the difficulty of having Starlink deployed in South Africa.
Starlink is Elon Musk's satellite internet service. It works in many countries, but using it is not yet legal in South Africa. In order to get the telecom licenses required, Starlink would need to give 30% ownership to historically disadvantaged groups like the majority black population who were shut out of the economy during apartheid. The South African government say this 30% rule is an attempt to tackle the racial injustices of the past. In March, Musk claimed that Starlink is not allowed to operate in South Africa simply because he's not black. The telecom regulatory body told the BBC in April that Starlink had not submitted an application for a license in South Africa. The South African government has proposed a workaround where IT companies like Starlink will be allowed to operate if they invest in infrastructure or in small and medium-sized black-owned businesses.
There's also Israel. We mustn't forget that there's the Israel factor. So that's also what's happening concurrently to the issue of AfriForum.
That's independent political analyst Khanyi Magubane. She says that South Africa's decision to take Israel to the International Court of Justice, alleging that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, has played into recent diplomatic tensions with the US. Trump's Presidential Action Directive also claims South Africa has taken aggressive positions towards the United States and its allies, including accusing Israel, not Hamas, of genocide in the International Court of Justice. So farm attacks, land expropriation, Starlink, and the decision to pursue Israel in the ICJ. Whatever the reasons are for the soured diplomatic relations and dramatic tweets between the US and South Africa, it's important to remember that there are real-life consequences to people's livelihoods, both in South Africa and the surrounding countries who depend on it economically.
Slashing financial assistance, escalating tariffs, and potentially scrapping the African Growth and Opportunity Act, also known as AGOA, could all do sizable economic damage to a country that already struggles with mass unemployment. The wider context is that the US has also frozen funding for its emergency plan for AIDS relief, which contributes about 17% to South Africa's HIV/AIDS program. Johan Gutsier says he tried to caution representatives of the White House about portrayals of South Africa.
You're disturbing the middle grouping in South Africa. You're not creating unity. You're not creating the economic stability. You're actually fueling radicalism.
That's it this week for BBC Trending. Thanks to Umpo Lakaje, Peter Mwai and Gareth Jones for mixing this episode. Our editor was Flora Carmichael.